Welcome to the TheKnifeWife Podcast. I'm Suze, married to Bob Terzuola. This podcast is about couples who live, love, and work together. It has little to do with knives. So people say to me, why are you doing a podcast? And it's really a long story, but the short story is because we can't do a TikTok dance.
Am I allowed to laugh at things
Yes,
like that?
you are. Please laugh. I need an audience. And not only that, but I'm really tired of toxic media. I pretty much listen to comedy and music all the time. Maybe I watch some shows, but I can't listen to the news. I don't think people need any more of that. I feel like they need a break, and I hope that this provides that for 30 minutes. Anyway, people keep telling me to write a book, and I'm too ADD. I can't do it. So this is my book, and these are the stories that will be told. I'll tell you a little bit about me first. I was born in Chicago. I'm a Cubs fan. I was almost born at Wrigley Field, and I'll tell that story on another show. And I started out as an artist, a trained medical illustrator, because my mother wanted me to do something practical. And instead, I became a master printmaker, a master gardener. I'm a former farmer. I used to have a big farm in Illinois, and not a big farm, but a farm where we had lots of animals and 600 chickens, and it was quite a production. And what are some other things? I carried a skeleton around the world for a year, and I did a 365 project, and her name is Sam. And maybe we'll have her in the show notes or pictures of her. Everyone in the knife world that I live in is very familiar with Sam, and they bring her gifts and whatever. When the project ended, everyone asked me, well, are you going to bring Sam to the next show? And I'm like, no, she's 42 pounds with her stand, and I carried her around the world for a year, and that's enough. Anyway, I'm a professional creative. I've designed patterns now. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm a serial entrepreneur because I have a low threshold for boredom. And Bob is from New York. He's 100% Italian. He only can speak with his hands. He was a Peace Corps volunteer and a Peace Corps trainer. He lived in Central America for many years. He ran a jade jewelry factory in Guatemala. He had several government positions, which we don't all know about. He's been making knives since 1980. He wrote a book on how to make knives. He holds several patents. He's a father, a grandfather. He loves ducks. I call him my walking Wikipedia. I can't tell you how often people call us on the phone, and I hope I don't embarrass you, Bob, and they'll ask a fact. And a lot more phone calls happened before there was Google, but they still call up because you don't always get the right information. And so they call Bob to fact check. And he tells them the story, and I'll say to him, well, just answer the question, honey. Don't start at the Middle Ages. So that's a famous thing we say. Anyway, we come from definitely different collars. He's blue, I'm white. What else, Bob? What else did I forget to say about us?
I think you probably covered it pretty well.
Okay. We do live in San Diego County, and we have 2 dogs. We have a golden doodle, Gigi, who is the love of our lives. We have 2 cats, 3 chickens, and at this point, maybe a crow or 2. We have frequent visitors.
Yeah, we like to feed them peanuts.
Yes. Anyway, so thanks for putting up with us. Today I have a first guest. Her name is Valerie, and the reason I asked her to be with us, and she's doing us a great favor, she's visiting with her parents in Charleston, South Carolina, and so she's been in my knife life since day one. And I met her at my first show I went to, and not only is she smart and beautiful and a great businesswoman, but she also is married to a guy called Alan Olishewitz, and he's, well, like my guy. They're a handful sometimes. Anyway, but she has experienced some of these stories. And one time Bob and I were leaving from Santa Fe, New Mexico. We lived in New Mexico at the time, and a flight landed in Florida, not in Florida. We were going to New York, but it landed in Texas somewhere. And who gets on the plane but Valerie and Alan? And before we get to that, I will say that we were driving to the airport that morning, and it was dark, and it was about an hour drive from Santa Fe to Albuquerque. And I looked over when it got light out, and I noticed Bob was wearing this jacket. And I was a wardrobe. I was a costumer. Clothes are so important to me.
It was a beautiful leather jacket, very warm, perfect for the wintertime.
Valerie's
it was a black
laughing.
leather jacket. Yes, I love the jacket. I really like that jacket.
Anyway, it was given to Bob by a knife company, and we will not mention their name. If I do, we're going to edit it out. And when I first saw the jacket, it was, to me, a cheap leather jacket that they had bought through some company that services businesses that sells water bottles and clothes and golf shirts and T-shirts. And it had an embroidery of the company's name on it, but it was a members-only jacket with a neck strap around it. And it was probably one of the cheapest looking jackets I had ever seen. And when I first saw it, Bob immediately defended it and said, "It's a beautiful jacket. I love this jacket." Right, Bob? Is that what you said?
Yes. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop
Anyway,
here.
so to my surprise, I was driving to the airport, and we're going to New York. It's February. It's cold out, and he's got this cheap, chintzy leather jacket on.
It wasn't chintzy. It was comfortable.
Yes, comfortable. It was, yeah, maybe. And he said, "Well, it fits me well." Well, there's some pluses to that. But anyway, I thought, why did you bring this jacket? You need a warm jacket. We're going to New York. And why are you wearing a jacket from a company who has not done well by you? And he continued to defend it, and we got into a little thing on it. Anyway, we get on the plane, and the plane stops in Texas, and who gets on but Alan and Valerie. And Alan sees the jacket and says, "What the... Why are you wearing that jacket? That's crazy. Take that off," or something like that. Anyway, and so I burst out laughing. And Valerie was just, I don't know, she just was caught between this crossfire. And Bob said, "It's a wonderful jacket," and all this stuff.
From the moment they got in the airplane, I started getting it from the left, and I started getting it from the right. Cannons to the left of me, cannons to the right of me.
And at this point, I figure, let's introduce Valerie. She's walked on the plane. So Valerie, say hello.
Hi. Well, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest, and I didn't remember it had been that long. So I guess time flies when you're having fun, right? So
I guess, or running a business, right?
yeah. So yeah, I remember the jacket episode. Well, I just remember Bob being furious, absolutely furious, because Alan, when you walked off the plane, Alan went, "I cannot believe you're still wearing this jacket," because Alan had the same jacket.
Yeah.
And Alan had actually disposed of it.
Yes.
I was getting whiplash from looking at everybody.
We had sent it back to the sender, really, returned it. So that was the story. And then I remember Bob just
so wait, so you did like a breakup thing? You did like a breakup thing and you sent the jacket back to the company?
Yes.
Oh, God,
Yeah,
it's so funny. Alan did. I know you did, Bob. You were wearing it.
We did. Totally did it.
Oh, here's your stuff back. Okay. I didn't know that. All right. So anyway, so we get off the plane, right? And we're waiting for our luggage, and we were going to share a cab to the hotel. This was before Uber, and I'm looking for Bob. And at that point in time, he smoked a pipe. So I thought maybe he was outside smoking. And so I'm looking for him. I'm looking for the jacket. I'm looking for this black jacket that everyone's laughing about, and Alan's shaking his head, and Valerie's laughing, and he's standing on the curb in 20-degree weather in his shirt sleeves. And I said to him, "Bob, where's the jacket?" He said, "I threw it away." And then I couldn't stop laughing. That was the funniest thing. I'm like, okay, so you're in New York, it's 20 degrees, and you've just thrown your jacket away because you're so pissed at us?
Yep.
And I walk in and I say to Alan, "You're not going to believe this. It gets better, Alan. You threw the jacket away." And Alan says, "What?" He said, "Well, that's where mine should have gone." But anyway, so that was our first, what can I say, fun story. And I had already known Valerie from meeting her at another show. And I always wondered why Alan was never at his table. She was always at the table. She sold all the knives off the table. Everyone loved her. And she was amazing. And Alan would just walk around the room during the show. And
Well, if I may comment on that.
yeah.
Yeah, Valerie is a much better salesperson than Alan. Alan tends to be a little bit dour and doesn't take comments very well. So it's probably better for his sales that he was away from the table and on the floor and let Valerie be the face of Elishewitz Knives. She did a really good job selling them, and everybody loves Valerie.
Yes. And
Thank you.
yes. And you resembled that remark, Bob, because we were at a show where they were bidding up on one of his custom knives, and it was at $9,000. And he looked over at the guy who was writing his name down for $9,200. And he said, I wouldn't pay that kind of money for that knife. What are you, crazy? I'm like, Bob, go away from the table. Leave the table.
Yeah, I know. Why don't you go walk around?
Yes, go walk around.
Go walk around, yeah.
Yeah. And it was during COVID. We had to wear masks. It was a weird show. But anyway, so, and I'm sure, Al, you can tell us more, but I don't know what you thought about when you met me. I mean, you met me. I was like meeting everyone in this room, hundreds of people for the first time. And I was the new girl on the block. And little did I know that I would have so much to do with Bob's business down the road. I didn't know I was going to be Valerie.
We were just very happy to meet you and very happy to see that Bob was happy and had found that was so awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I don't know. Is he happy? Hard to tell.
I don't know. Valerie, do you think everybody thought that I was a mean curmudgeon?
Well, nobody can see my face, right?
Right.
Uh-oh.
Yes. I can't tell you how many people have told me how much happier Bob seems since we met. And people like some of our best friends, like Jack Alvarez, have thanked me profusely. Speaking of Jack Alvarez, I have another Alan story before you tell yours. I was at the Blade Show, and I was it's a huge show, and it's in Atlanta in this big convention center. And I was standing in one of the big aisles in the middle, smack dab in the middle of the show. And Jack Alvarez had stopped to talk to me, and I knew his history, and I knew all about him, and I was just saying nice things. And I saw Alan at the end of the row, and he was running towards me. And Alan is a pretty fit, active guy, so I thought he was just running to the next table. I didn't know where he was going. And so I didn't think he was running towards me. I thought he was going somewhere else. And of course, he came running right up to Jack and pushed him away from me. And he said, "Don't talk to that guy. He went to prison." And I said, "I know, he did his time. He's not some violent criminal." I said, "He'd done his time." And he wasn't a violent criminal. Anyway, so yeah, Alan. I have lots of Alan stories. But anyway, so when you started working with Alan, what were some of the first things he did? Was it easy? He's a pretty controlling guy. I can't imagine. He said, "Oh, yeah, here, I'll move over. Help me out."
No, actually, so Alan already had his business established. He had been making knives since the late 80s, and we met in the mid to late 90s. And so he had his ways of doing things. And Alan, well, how not control freak, but pretty strict about and rigid about certain things. And so it had a hard time letting go. And it goes in with the other story of how I was at shows with no supervision, obviously, and he was just out walking around.
Yeah.
But it took some time to get there, right? So at first, I couldn't really be trusted. And even customers were that way. Like, people could not just give me their address on the phone for me to mail them a catalog, right? So, and so it just took time, and little by little, I could start do certain things. And I really, from the get-go, from when we got married, I started taking care of all the admin stuff. So I answered the phone for many years. Alan never had a phone in his shop. You could never get to Alan directly. You'd have to talk to me first, basically, and I would really message. Or I took care of the websites and taking photos and things like that. But that just really happened gradually. And they were more of a thing where Alan would let go of something and I would finally get to it, except for one thing: the phone, the answering the phone. So there was one day, I don't know, the phone rang one day, and I must have been making dinner. I think that's what it was. And so our office was at home, so we would answer the phone no matter what time it rang. So he answered the phone, And I could hear only one side of the conversation, Alan, and not the customer that he was talking to. But I quickly realized that he was speaking to a customer and the conversation wasn't going well at all. It
Like, what was he
ended up,
saying?
it was more in the tone. And it was really like, I could tell he was not being very helpful and not being very polite, almost even with the customer. And I was just very worried about how the conversation was going. And alarmed at this, I came up to him and I was like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And so, to his defense, Alan thought it was another knife maker that was goofing on him. So, as the person was asking seemingly very silly questions, Alan thought it was just a joke. So, he was answering in a pretty rude fashion. And then he finally realized that it was not a joke and that it was truly a customer. So, what the heck? He was in all the way already. So, he ended the conversation with, well, maybe you're too stupid to own one of my knives.
Oh, God.
And that was the last day Alan talked to a customer on the phone.
Yes, I see your
'Cause I
point.
put my foot down and I was like, there's no way we're doing this ever again. So, for listening to this podcast, to the poor person that called that day, I apologize. I am very sorry that I did not pick up the phone.
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah, I'm the interface with Bob too, and I love that story. That's a great story.
When you were talking about how I was at the table by myself at shows, that's an extension of this. So then I started talking to everybody on the phone and taking care of customers more and more. And now this leads to another funny story where we were at a show and I was actually taking care of one customer. And there was a second customer that was waiting for me to be done with his first customer. And Alan was actually at the table. So he got the attention of the second person and offered to help. And customer number 2 went, oh, no, it's okay. I'll wait for Valerie
I'll
to be
wait for
done.
Valerie. Yeah, I can understand that.
That's great.
Very perceptive.
There was no turning back for Alan then, right?
He has made progress and enjoys more talking to customers at shows. But I think to the defense of makers who were maybe a little bit older and have a harder time or had a harder time, is that these guys worked in their shop by themselves.
Right.
For weeks at a time, never really having that much conversations with customers necessarily. And then they would get to knife shows and literally have all these knife groupies, which are grown men, wanting so much of their attention. And I think that was a little bit much for some of these introverts. And that led to some of these knife makers appearing to be a little more crunchy.
Yes, I totally get it. And part of why I started this podcast was I've met so many couples who work together. And most of the time, the business is in their home, like yours is and ours is. And so you live with the person, you look at them person every day. When they come home from work, they walk 7 steps or 20 into the house. And you again. And Bob, he doesn't really want to be disturbed when he's making knives. So I do disturb him occasionally because I have to ask him questions. But you're right. They're introverts. They're solo shows, meaning people. And Bob can be just as much of a curmudgeon as Alan can be. And I love Alan, and Alan knows I love him.
That's a canard. That's a canard.
So, and I know because people will come to this table when I first did the first show and they just look at me and they go, "Where's Bob?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm invisible. All right." And, or they'd come to the table and say, "Oh, are you Bob's new girlfriend?" I'm like, well, I guess, yeah, you can call me that. I'm a little old to be called that, but okay.
I was going to just say, in my case, people back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, when we first met and I first started going to knife shows, a lot of the knife makers were older. Alan was one of the youngest kind of at the time. And so people had heard of his name, but didn't know what he looked like. And so people would come to our table and ask if my dad was here, because a lot of the knife makers were older. And I was in my early 30s, and they thought that I was the daughter that was helping dad. So.
Yes. Well, I've had that also. Now they know different, but I had the same thing. for people who knew who Bob was, and they said, "Oh, I know he has 2 sons." Someone said, "But I didn't know he had a daughter." I said, "He doesn't. I'm not his daughter." And they would scratch their heads, and I liked playing with them a little bit in that. But it's a challenge. I think maybe we should write a manual for new knife wives of how to handle shows, how to handle customers, how to handle the husbands and whatever. Not that they're awful guys. I don't mean that at all. But they're definitely unusual in that they're makers and they're alone, as you said, in their shops all the time. And Bob listens to radio. He listens to podcasts and he listens to books on tape. At the beginning, he listened to talk radio all day.
Mhm.
Does
I
Al?
remember that.
Yeah. So you've been to Bob's shop and we've been to your shops.
Yes, long time ago.
And so if we wrote a manual, or what would be the one thing you would say to a new knife wife? What would you say? Or to even anyone who works with their husband in a business, because whether it's knives or they're selling whatever, or they're creating whatever, it's still the same advice.
I think the approach is the same, but what I would say, and what's something that's always been important to me, is that you have to work as a team. So everybody has to work towards a common goal and work as a team, but at the same time, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And I am not going to pretend to go in the shop and tell Alan how to make knives, but he's not going to come in my office and tell me how I need to do things. So we work towards a common goal and make it happen, but we are each masters of our own domains.
Yes, that's for sure. So, and now we're doing a live, Alan does live things on Instagram, but we do a live Zoom call with Bob has a subscription service, Shop Talk, and he has his Shop Dragons. And at first I was just in the background and I had him in front of the computer and I didn't think I was really whatever. And everyone's like, "Well, where's Suze?" And he kept pulling me in. So I'd be like some vaudeville show. He'd be hooking me into the side of the thing. And so finally now we just start. We had a song written for us for the show, for his 12-part series. And we use that when we come in for Shop Talk. And so we come in from 2 sides of the camera and meet in the middle. And I keep trying to sneak out when he's answering questions about knives. I don't know anything about that. I don't know shit about knives. I mean, I do know because I edited a 12-part series and listened to 150 hours of raw footage of how to make a knife when we did that. But he's the craftsman in this regard. I don't know. So I don't think I should be on camera. But anyway, I am.
I disagree.
I know. They've heard us.
Everybody would much rather look at you than look at me, let me tell you.
Well, that's very nice, honey. Anyway, so, I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode of The Knife Wife. And is there anything else you want to share with us, Valerie? Any
No,
news?
I'm just honored to have been invited to be the first guest. And you guys, I love you guys. You know that, both of you. And we've been friends for many years. And I'm now really looking forward to more episodes of the podcast.
Thanks. Yeah. No one's more surprised than I am that we're doing a podcast. Anyway, so, thanks a lot. Give my love to Alan. Enjoy Charleston. I was in Charleston last fall and it changed my life. I have a very good, fond memory of being there. So I know you're going to enjoy it. Are your parents awake yet? Are they here yet from France?
Oh, yeah. We all arrived yesterday, and museum tourings this morning when it was pouring, but then the weather is going to clear up and we're going to go walk around.
Okay. Lots to walk around. Lots of pretty buildings. Lots of nice architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, you can reach Valerie and Alan through elishwitzknives.com. And they're also on Instagram under Elishwitz Knives, correct, Valerie?
Yes, it's Elishwitz_knives on Instagram.
Okay. And we'll have this in the show notes. There'll be a picture of Valerie and Alan. It's a great picture with their dogs. All right. Thanks a lot, Valerie.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please share this with a friend and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Please support our efforts through Patreon at The Knife Wife. And for all Terzawola goodness, go to terzawola.net. And remember, if you're not laughing, you're not living. Comments and questions can be made on Instagram at The Knife Wife Podcast or our Facebook group, The Knife Wife Podcast. And if you're a couple who work together and would like to be on our podcast, Tell us about yourself with an email at eccentricsues.com or terzawola.net.